This morning, the aggressive timeline for a vaccine. The FDA could use its emergency authority to greenlight a coronavirus vaccine before formal approval. Already mired in some political controversy, we sit down with the head of the FDA to ask him directly, would he first use that vaccine on himself? Also, does a Texan actually have to be inside their castle to be protected by the castle doctrine? The author of Bo's Law joins us to discuss new legislation named in honor of Botham Jean, seeking to address the use of excessive and deadly force. Plus, his Republican opponent is touting her business bona fides. But will an endorsement from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce help this freshman Democrat keep his seat? As the fall campaign heats up, we're headed to the 32nd Congressional District in Texas. And are you planning to vote by mail? If so, what you should know before you do.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good morning. Coming to you from downtown Dallas, I'm Jason Wheeler, in for Jason Whiteley this week. Before we sit down with our first guest, as always, we're getting you caught up on some of the political highlights that we're watching today. Governor Abbott is considering a state takeover of the Austin Police Department. The governor tweeted Friday saying this in response to the city's decision to move money away from the police department to other services. Under the governor's plan, Austin Police could be consolidated under DPS. But that proposal would still need to pass the state legislature. The chairman of HEB is stepping into the controversy over mail-in ballots. Charles Butt wrote a letter to the Supreme Court of Texas siding with the Harris County clerk who wanted to send mail-in ballot applications to every eligible voter in the county. Republican State Attorney General Ken Paxton said the plan was against the law and unsafe, and that the Texas Supreme Court then blocked that proposal. But Charles Butt says it's the safe way to protect people from coronavirus. By the way, the Harris County clerk does plan to send mail-in ballot applications to voters age 65 and older and those who are disabled. Those people are allowed to vote by mail under Texas law. Texas is spending $15 million on an advertising campaign to get more people to fill out the census. Right now, a little under 80% of households have responded. Counting for the census ends soon on September 30th. Well, the CDC is telling states to get ready for a coronavirus vaccine as early as the week of the election. Some experts say that's an impossible timeline to deliver a vaccine that is fully tested and known to be safe and effective. And there are worries that politics could influence science here. So we went straight to the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Stephen Hahn, to get his take on the record.
We've seen this splash of headlines here in recent days from the CDC telling different states across the country to get their infrastructure ready, to be ready to distribute a vaccine by November 1st. Of course, any authorization that happens, though, comes from you, from the FDA. Is that a realistic timeline that we could see a vaccine that early?
Jason, I want to be really clear about this one. I was a cancer doctor before I became FDA commissioner, and I don't have a crystal ball. And I will not and cannot predict when the data will come to us. Data have to mature from the phase 3 trials. They will be sent to us, and we will look at those data when they're available. I just can't forecast as to when they might be available. I think it's great to be prepared for any eventuality.
But just to put a fine point on it, without seeing the full set of data, you would be willing to go forward with an emergency use authorization if the initial data indicates that we're looking at a safe and effective vaccine.
We're going to be flexible in our approach, but we made clear in June what data we needed to see with respect to safety and efficacy, and we're sticking to those criteria.
As decision time for this draws near, let's say the pressure really starts to get intense for you here. How far are you personally willing to go? Are you willing to put your position on the line here to hold off and make sure that this vaccine does not happen until it is safe and effective?
Jason, I'm going to be, again, really clear about this one, and I have been before, and that is we will only make a decision on the basis of the science and data, and that no other criteria are going to be used.
We had a University of Texas Politics Project survey that was done in late June, and they found that even if a vaccine were available, 21% of people in that survey said they wouldn't get that vaccine, and another 20% on top of that said that they were unsure. How big of a concern is that to you?
So this is a concern for me and for the agency, because we want the American public to have confidence in the fact that we will use our rigorous criteria to judge the safety and efficacy of a vaccine. I think a couple of things, Jason, it's a really good question. One is when you look at how the process has been expedited, a couple things go into that. One is FDA has been doing what's called a rolling review, meaning that we're not just waiting for one part of this to be done and then to look at the data. We've been looking at it in real time, and that cuts down the review time without cutting corners. The second thing is that, as you know, manufacturers and the government have been what's called manufacturing at risk, so that they're already in the process of going through the manufacturing process so that a vaccine can be available if a vaccine is either approved or authorized.
If you thought that it might encourage people to be more confident in a vaccine, if they are skittish about, let's say vaccines in general, would you be willing to be one of the first to get one of these just to show that, hey, I put my money where my mouth is here?
Based upon the decision of our FDA scientists, if they determine that this was safety and efficacy, I absolutely would do so.
Let me ask you about convalescent plasma, because you came out alongside the president, hailed this as a huge breakthrough, and then there was criticism that followed from some scientists saying that the data just wasn't there yet. You went on Twitter and said, hey, criticism justified here, and now we're in the stage of looking at more data. Do we need a lot more data before convalescent plasma is approved for widespread use as a treatment for COVID-19?
So, Jason, there's been an incredible demand over the last 4 to 5 months for convalescent plasma, and it continues. Our decision around the emergency use authorization, and I said this at the press conference, shows promising results. They're not definitive results, but they're promising results.
You have a big job right now. Before you took this on, you were the chief medical executive at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, a renowned institution there. I'm curious, what did you pick up in that position? Because that's a big job too. What did you pick up in that position that is helping to inform how you go forward in the job you're in now?
So one of the things I learned in my previous job was to trust the doctors and the scientists, because they'll lead you to the right answer for cancer patients. And I can tell you this, I trust the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, scientists at FDA, because they do know what they're doing. They are terrific individuals, and they, throughout the pandemic, have made excellent decisions on behalf of the American people.
Time now for Statewide, and the first thing we're going to be talking about is COVID-19 and the trends with that. With us, Ross Ramsey, the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. Ross, thanks as always for being here with us. As promised, let's start with COVID. We're seeing the trends finally start to go the right way in Texas. Do you think that's going to mean we're going to see some of those restrictions fall away?
We're kind of in purgatory in a way right here. The governor is seeing hospitalization rates go down. New caseload rates are going down. Death rates follow those a little bit, but they're hoping that those go down. And he said we need to watch for three things. We need to watch the Labor Day weekend, which we're in the middle of. We need to watch the hurricane season, which requires people to be transported all over the place. And the big one is the opening of schools and colleges to see what that does to the spread of the coronavirus. If the numbers stay pretty good, I would expect we'd see some restrictions lifted.
I know a lot of people on unemployment are going to be watching that closely too, because TWC is going to be following the governor's lead. Might we see a return to that work search requirement? We'll have to keep tuned for that. I want to talk about this too. This could be a real mess. The state now launching a $15 million campaign to increase census participation. We've been sitting at like 80% response rate here. This state could lose out on a lot of money and representatives if they can't get those numbers up, and we're running out of time.
Yeah, I think 80 is probably optimistic. The state of Texas is hoping to get all of its people counted because that's what, federal aid and all of those kinds of things are based on, from, early childhood learning programs to school lunches to highway money. So, and it sets for a decade. So they want everybody to show up. They're using some of the federal CARES money, $15 million, to try to get everybody to fill out the forms. Another round of forms is going out.
All right, we shall see how that goes. Ross, stick with us for the Reporters Roundtable in just a little bit. Texas lawmakers continue to press for reforms in the wake of the murder of Botham Jean in Dallas. Coming up next, we're joined by the author of Bo's Law, what the legislation would address and why he says cops should keep their cameras on. Also, Congressman Colin Allred is talking about a big endorsement and the 2020 race to hold on to his seat that flipped to the Democrats in 2018. Earlier this summer, we were joined by a panel sharing their own personal experiences and reacting to the killing of George Floyd in police custody. Well, now they're back. This time we're talking about the shooting of Jacob Blake by police in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And we're talking about this momentous summer in the fight for racial justice and equality. What has changed in the past few months, and what hasn't? If you'd like to give us a listen, we'd really appreciate it. Point your phone's camera at this code on the screen, that QR code right there. It will open a window on your phone and take you right to this episode. And while you're there, take a moment to subscribe to our Y'all-itics podcast. We are now about 4 months away from the next Texas legislative session, and Representative Sherman is planning to introduce a bill to address the use of excessive and deadly force by police. It's known as Bo's Law, named after Botham Jean, the 26-year-old man who was sitting in his Dallas apartment when he was shot and killed exactly 2 years ago by an off-duty Dallas police officer who had entered the wrong apartment. The Democrat represents District 109, which includes DeSoto and Cedar Hill and parts of Dallas and many other cities in southern Dallas County. And Representative Sherman is joining us now this morning to talk more about Bo's Law. Thank you for being with us, Representative. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you for your interest.
Absolutely. So this bill really gets into a lot with the castle doctrine, which allows Texans, of course, to defend their homes without having to retreat. This came up in the former officer's trial for the murder of Botham Jean because she was claiming she shot in self-defense because although she had entered his apartment, she was actually in her unit. She thought she was in her unit, which was one floor beneath his. What would your bill do to address this?
Yeah, this bill is very important, named certainly after Botham Jean, and a young man who had such a promising future. The bill addresses the castle doctrine as well as mistake of fact, which were arguments that were not only used in that case, but also in Trayvon Martin's case. So this would certainly protect the right of homeowners and property owners if you could still protect your property. No one is looking to diminish that right from any of our citizens, but it would clarify that it has to be your property. You can't think that it was your home. It has to be your home or your car or your property in order to maintain the similar stand your ground.
So it takes away any possibility of a misunderstanding, in other words. So this legislation would also require officers to use their body cameras at all times, and you would penalize them, actually, if they turn those off early. Would that have mattered in this case?
Well, it does have some implications to the case. As the first African-American mayor for the city of DeSoto, I'll tell you, our city, I was proud of our police officers. We were the first police force in the nation to have body cams during the 2011-2012 fiscal year. That was way before Ferguson in 2014 or Sandra Bland in 2015. What this bill would do is would require that police officers turn on their body cams and that they cannot turn off the dash cam nor the body cam during an investigation. It's really to protect the integrity of law enforcement. Initially, dash cams in 2005, when it was introduced by Senator West, there was some pushback on it. And the same with body cams in 2015. But after police officers have seen that it has protected them and maintained the integrity of their work. There are so many fine officers that want to make sure that their side of the story is shown and it is true. And so this bill would also, Bo's law, protect that position as well and ensure that officers turned on their body cams and did not turn them off.
All right, so a preview of Bo's law to be introduced in the next legislative session by Representative Carl Sherman. Representative Sherman, thank you for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Well, this got the attention of a lot of people. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce recently endorsed our next guest, a Democrat who is facing a tough re-election campaign right now. Colin Allred is the freshman incumbent in District 32, which encompasses parts of Dallas County and Collin County, from the Park Cities to Richardson and Garland. And Representative Allred is joining us now from his district in Dallas this morning. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason.
So this Chamber of Commerce endorsement is a big one. This is from an organization that has historically backed a lot of Republicans. What does this do to help you against your Republican opponent, Genevieve Collins, who has talked about her own business bona fides in this campaign?
And I think the Chamber of Commerce, their support is a reflection of the work that I've tried to do in my first term in Congress, which is to find every avenue and every way I can to work on a bipartisan basis to deliver results. And it's just true that being pro-business doesn't mean that you have to be a Democrat or a Republican. It means that you have to take the decisions and take the actions and work as much as you can to find solutions to actually help businesses succeed. And that's why I think the Chamber endorsed me. I think that's why they gave me a 95% bipartisan score as part of the reasoning why they endorsed me. And I'm proud to have their support.
All right. Endorsements don't do any good if people don't know about them, though. And I know that you just released your first ad for your re-election campaign less than a week ago. Your opponent, who was on this show with us last week, told us that she's planning a $2.8 million ad buy that will start September 8th and go all the way through Election Day. That's a pretty big blitz there. How do you counter that? Can you counter that dollar for dollar?
Oh, don't worry, Jason. You'll see plenty of me on TV, probably on your channel as well. And, what we'll be talking about is the work that I've done delivering VA Hospital in Garland, something that is going to help us serve 184,000 veterans better than we were before, create 5,000 jobs. Passing the USMCA is going to create Texas jobs. Working with our small businesses and our workers during this crisis to get over COVID and maintain our economic strength. That's what our ad is about. That's what the campaign's going to be about, the work that I've done in Congress and the real results that I've delivered for my hometown, the place where I was born and raised.
I want to ask you this because there's been so much said about whether the results can be trusted this time as we head toward this important election. Do you think Texans can trust the results that come out on election night and possibly the days and nights after election night?
Well, I have confidence in our ability to have a free and fair election. Now, I am on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I can tell Texans and Americans in general that there are outside agitators that want to influence our election. And we, of course, have seen what I think of as an unprecedented attack on the United States Postal Service to try and make it harder or to slow down the mail and to impact voting by mail. That's something that during a pandemic, I think is completely outrageous, particularly given here in Texas, the folks who are able to vote by mail. If you're 65 or older or have a disability, these are the same folks we want to protect from COVID-19. So I'm confident that we're going to have a free and fair election, but everybody has to be vigilant and wary and make sure that we are not influenced by outside forces and that you are sure that you get your vote by mail ballot in as soon as you possibly can. Take advantage of early voting because we want to have every voice heard in this election. With our last remaining seconds here, your district is in the suburbs. How much is the presidential race going to weigh on what happens with your race? Because we know the suburbs are critical. Well, I think this is all about values. I think this is an election about values. I don't see it as being about right versus left. I think it's about right versus wrong. I think that at the presidential level, Joe Biden is clearly the better choice than our current president. I think he's going to do very well here because I think he appeals to our North Texas values. That's something that I've tried to do as well in my term in Congress. This is where I was born and raised and where my mom raised me as a single mother as a public school teacher. I think I know who we are, and I don't think I see that reflected in this president. All right, U.S. Representative Colin Allred, thanks for being with us this morning. Thanks, Jason.
All right, so we talked there about mail-in ballots. We're going to be discussing that next on our Roundtable. Stick with us.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
And time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines into perspective. Ross is back with us again and joining us each week. Bud Kennedy from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Plus we have Abby Livingston from the Texas Tribune with us. Thanks to all for being with us. Bud, I want to start with you. A lot of people are planning to vote by mail in this big election, but they might change their minds after reading your latest column because you did it and it didn't go so well.
Well, the column in Sunday's Star-Telegram and online at startelegram.com, I voted in the July runoff and my vote was rejected. But, it's because I didn't sign it carefully. I signed it just in a scribble, and then with a ballot, I signed it in a Sharpie. Don't do that. Sign it with a ballpoint. It's exactly the way you sign your voter card. Go out right now, deliver your mail-in ballot application, bring it to the elections office yourself. Then they'll mail your ballot out. When you get the ballot, vote and bring it in that day. Don't wait. Get it done. Once you vote, you won't get any more phone calls.
Sage advice. Thank you there, Bud. There was a Trump campaign bus tour across Texas last week. Dan Patrick leading this one. Does anybody remember the last time a Republican presidential candidate even had to run a campaign in Texas? Ross, are these polls really reflecting how close this is?
I think it is relatively close. The Republicans lost some ground in 2018. They're nervous this time. The Democrats are hopeful. I think this should be a very competitive year for both parties.
All right. And we still see it neck and neck even after the conventions, the first poll out for that. Abby, I want to ask you, what does that mean for the down ballot congressional races? I know a lot of folks are looking at those.
I think this is extremely ominous for a lot of Republicans running for the state legislature and the U.S. House. Trump's coattails are tougher than any Republican who's been the party leader in recent decades.
All right, Bud, Ross, Abby, thank you all. And we want to thank everybody else for watching as well. We will see you right here again next Sunday when Jason Whiteley will be back here on Inside Texas Politics. In the meantime, stay healthy and have a great week.